This tutorial introduces the design phase of the web development process. It looks at the 3 different methods of designing and focus on the first one for this particular tutorial. So with this in mind, we've got to start moving away from the whole idea of analysis and planning, which we've dealt with in the tutorials up until now, and which constitute assignment 1, the idea, analysis and planning. So at that stage, you know what you want to design, you know what it's going to look like, you know how many pages you're going to have, you know what kind of media you're going to have. From in this stage here, the design phase, it's all about putting those together, to creating the content and to implementing it onto a website. So that's what we're going to deal with for the next number of tutorials, quite a few tutorials, it turns out. So in this particular tutorial, I'm going to just introduce the 3 overarching ways of creating websites. So, but before I do, I'm going to have a look at just a couple of little principles that I want to kick off before we get going. First of all, people hate to wait. See what I mean? Even that pause makes people uncomfortable. Okay, so remember that when you're creating your website. Remember that you have to optimize your actual website for download times, and you remember that some people will be looking at this on mobile devices, some will be looking at tablets, some people on desktops and laptops and TVs and so on. Okay, games, consoles, etc. So, but people hate to wait. That's number 1. People hate to scroll. Now, some people will turn around and say, hold on a second, I don't mind scrolling. You know, I like to procrastinate a little bit and I like to scroll up and down. But, you know, let's be honest, when we go onto a website, more and more websites are non-scrollable websites. They're actually very short pages. And there's a reason for that. Number 1, people hate to wait. So the longer the page, the longer you have to wait for it. As well as that, people like to be able to just scan a page very, very quickly. And if it's all on the one screen, it's easier to do so than if you're scrolling up and down and so on. So keep that in mind when you're designing your website. People hate to read. Now, with that in mind, I'm not talking about whether you like to get out a book or you have a Kindle and you like to read that or whatever the case might be. But people, in general, when we get to websites, we like to be able to see what we're looking for. And we like to scan a website, okay? We like to be able to just look and scan and see what we want, click on that. And when we get to something worth reading, we don't mind reading it. But we don't want to read everything on the website in order to find what we really are looking for. People would rather scroll than read. And people would rather wait than read. So this tells you people rather do pretty much anything than read. Okay, so make sure your pages are scannable. Now, this next sentence here is my favorite sentence in the entire module. People are not necessarily rational or consistent. Sometimes they are. What does that mean? It means everybody is different. Okay, so we really have to monitor and measure what people do on our website and learn from that. And if we find that people really hate to read, well, then we make sure it's scannable. So we learn from what we're doing. We learn from people coming to our website. We learn from the drop-off rates, where they're leaving, why they're leaving, hopefully, and therefore improving everything from there on. So it's all about making sure that your pages are as easy to use and as effective as they possibly can be in achieving your goal. What is your goal? Well, your goal is whatever you set out your aim to be in the first part of your analysis phase. So keep that in mind, that you're not just creating a page or a website just for the sake of it. You're creating it to try to achieve something that you set out way back in your analysis and planning phase. Okay, that is the finish line. That is what you're aiming for. That's what you're trying to achieve. And through metrics, we can actually tell how well we're doing that. Now, the next line here, remember, walk before you run. That simply means that at the very beginning of this course, this design phase of this, I'm going to actually take my time going through stuff, because what you learn early on really will stand to you later on. Okay, you may not see it initially, but you will see it, especially as you move further and deeper into the whole design of websites, etc. So remember, walk before you run, and then run like hell. What that means is Take your time, learn the basics, get the foundations right, and then practice, practice, practice. Practice doesn't make perfect in this case. Practice makes it work. The great thing about web design is that if something doesn't work, you can see it doesn't work. Okay, and then you can fix it and you can move on. So it's very, very step by step, and we can do that. Okay, so those little rules there are important. It's all about focusing on what your aim is. Remember that your website, a lot of people, when they start designing pages and designing navigational structures and designing sites, they kind of forget what the main purpose of the website is. Keep that in mind at all stages. Keep your audience in mind at all stages. So everything we've done in the analysis phase and the planning phase will come to fruition in this phase here. So it's really important that we actually focus on that and keep that in mind. Okay, web design methods. Well, in total there are 3. We're going to have a look at all 3 of them. And we'll talk about how good, bad, or indifferent all 3 of them are as we go through it, okay? First of all I'm going to do is introduce the 3 of them right now, just very briefly, so we kind of get an idea of what the 3 are. I'm going to, in this particular tutorial, I'm going to look at the first one. And then in other tutorials, I'll look at the other 2. But in this particular case here, I'm going to start off and I'm just going to introduce what the 3 of them are, first of all. First one is called the HTML conversion program. Now, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's not a programming language. It's really a layout or design or a syntax language. Okay, so it's actually fairly straightforward to learn. You'll learn it fairly easily, and it makes a lot of sense a lot of the time. Okay, so HTML conversion program in this case is a program created for something else, as it turns out, that can convert to web pages. Okay, and you might say, well, I don't know of any of these. Well, the truth is we know of lots of these. Okay, Word is a very good example of a HTML conversion program. Excel, PowerPoint, all of these. In fact, quite a few packages that we use on a day-to-day basis will have an option for us to save as a web page or save as HTML. Okay, now that's the first method. So we're going to have a look at that in this particular tutorial, and then we'll move on to the other ones in other tutorials. Okay, so the second method is a text editor. Now this is something very simple, like Notepad, something very, very basic. Okay, and what you can do from that is you can type in some HTML and you can create your page from that. Okay, again, very straightforward stuff. There is a bit of a learning curve here because we have to start learning we're going to talk about tags later on, and we're going to learn about attributes and stuff like that, but we have to learn, and that'll give us a good foundation of how web pages are laid out and why they're laid out in this way and what each thing does for us. So that's the second method. So that's using a text editor. And then on to the third method, which is a HTML editor. Now, a HTML editor, and again, HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, a HTML editor is a piece of software designed specifically to create web pages. And I'm going to throw another acronym in here. A lot of these are called WYSIWYG editors, which means what you see is what you get. So actually, they're very straightforward to use. They're really, really simple to use. And they're a bit like doing something in PowerPoint, but it creates HTML for you. So what I'm going to look at there is the third method we're going to look at. And these are dedicated pieces of software to create web pages, and because they're dedicated to creating web pages, they don't have any they don't have anything in there that's not necessary for web pages. They don't do unnecessary things. They're very focused on what they're trying to do, and they create very efficient web pages, as it turns out. So we'll see this over time, and we'll see how this works. So for starters, we're going to kick off and have a look at what a HTML conversion program is, how simple it is, and how it works. Okay, so I'm going to have a look at this. I'm just going to open up Word here, and I'm going to create a web page from it. Okay, and I'm just going to jump across to Word. Okay, now this is a very simple web page we see here. Okay, a very simple Word document as we see here. There's nothing really in it that's all that exciting. There's an image up here on top, and then there's some text down here below. Okay, so it's very straightforward. I've centered this here and so on. Okay, so all I'm going to do here in this case here is I'm just going to go File, Save As, And instead of saving as a Word document, I'm going to save it as, file, save as. Instead of saving as a Word document, I'm going to save it as a HTML or a web page. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here until I find web page here, which is here. Web page HTML. Now you can see web page filtered below that. You can see single file web page. This is the one I want here. This is the normal run-of-the-mill ordinary web page. So, and you can see HTML or HTML. Okay, they're the actual the types of pages they are. Okay, there's no difference between the two of them. They're just, sometimes you create a web page with certain programs and it calls it HTML, and sometimes HTML. So the extension is slightly different, but they both work exactly the same way. So I'm just going to save that as a web page. Okay, and I'm going to call the page trial page. Okay, and I'm going to go save. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump into the folder where I saved the page. Okay, and in this folder here, you can see that I've created a page called trialpage.html, but also you can see here that it's created an actual file called trial page file. Okay, which is an actual a folder with that in it. Okay, so what I'm just going to do here is I'm going to open up this. Okay, and you can see here that the page looks very similar to what I saw on Word. Not exactly the same, but very similar. Okay, and you can turn around and say, oh God, that's great. I mean, we're after creating a web page very, very quickly. And it did. We created a web page. Okay, very, very quickly. And on top of that, the page is here, folders there, and in that folder there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other files. So it's created 6 other files in there. Okay. So what I'm looking at there is I've created my very first web page. Okay, so I've created my very first web page using a HTML conversion program. Okay, so you got to ask yourself, right, how good is that? Why don't I use this all the time? That's so simple to create a web page. Well, what I'm just going to say is, while it's so simple to create a web page, is it the best method? Okay, first of all, baggage. All right, for starters, I'm just going to jump back into the PowerPoint here and just show you that what it does is it creates baggage. As you've seen, I've created a page, but on top of that, there's another folder in there, and in that folder, there's 6 other files. So there's lots of stuff in there which is not necessary for me to be able to carry on with this. Okay, so I'm just going to have a quick look at this here for a second. So I've got this, and I've also got all these files in here. Okay, so a grand total of 6 other files in there and a folder. So there's loads of stuff in there which is, is not necessary. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a page created using a HTML editor. Okay, this is the page here, and this is the file here. This is the image. Okay, now because there's an image in it, yes, there has to be a second file with an image in it. Okay, so I just want to show you that's what you, when I open this up, that's what you see here. Okay, that's the file created using the HTML editor, and this is the file created using conversion from Word. Okay, now when you look at those, both of those pages are absolutely identical. Okay, absolutely identical. But the difference is one creates one file, with the one using the HTML editor creates one file and an image, so 2 in total, and the other one creates one file and a folder and 6 others. So in other words, in grand total of 7 files. Okay, now that's for starters, so it creates baggage. Okay, so you can say, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's not so good. Okay, second thing is, conversion is not a precise art. Now with that in mind, we've all at some stage in our academic career got a Word document and opened it up in a package which is older or newer than the package we have on our computers and so on. Okay, so a version of Word, we saved it up, somebody sent us an older one or a newer one than the version of Word we're using, And sometimes it converts, and there's sometimes a little bit of messiness with the conversion. It's not exactly correct. You might see square boxes and stuff appearing, okay? So what I'm putting forward here is the whole idea, if Word can't convert to Word precisely, how can it convert from Word to a complete other language like HTML? And the answer is it doesn't, okay? It creates problems, it creates other things as well. Editability. Now, I hold up my hand here and say editability isn't really a word, but I think it actually is perfect in this particular context, because editability simply means that once you convert from Word to a web page, in order for you to change that, it's not all that editable. It's not all that there's not that much chance to change it and alter it in that format. Okay, quite often you have to bring it back into Word, change it there, bring it back again. So there's a lot of toing and froing. And as I said, conversion is not a precise art. So there's an awful lot of things which don't translate as well as they could. The next one is limited functionality. Okay, let's get this simple and get this straight. Word is a very good word processing package, but it's not a web site or a web page creation package. That's not its aim. Okay, so there's a lot of things that you'll want to do with a web page that you cannot do in Word. Very simple things, like sometimes when we click on a link, we might want the link to open up in another window or another tab. And Word won't allow us to do that. Very simple things. There's lots and lots and lots of other things that it won't allow us to do because it's not created for that. So that in itself we should start thinking, oh, okay, right, it actually isn't all that good for what I needed to do. It's okay for a basic page, static page maybe, but even then I wouldn't use it, okay? And I'll tell you why in the next step, okay? The last one is size. And I put out a little icon there saying extra large, okay? I'm just going to jump back out to my folder here a second, okay? And in my folder, I'm going to just jot down these couple of figures here. So there's 54, all right? I'm just jotting this down, 54 kilobytes. The page created is 54 kilobytes, okay? And if I just right-click my folder that also creates and go properties, you can see here that is another 40 kilobytes, okay? So it's easy for me to add it up, and I got 94 kilobytes. So the page created from Word, the size of the page is 94 kilobytes. I'm going to go into this one here, and this is a page created from Expression, which is the package we'll be using as a HTML editor. And you can see that the file size here is 3, and the file size of the image is 16K. So a total of 19K. So 19 kilobytes for this one versus 94 kilobytes for the exact same looking page created using Word. Now, you don't have to be a genius, and we don't have to worry about, oh, what does exactly 94 kilobytes mean? I'm going to keep it very simple for you, right? It's over 19K versus 94K. It's over 4.5 times its size. So it will take 4.5 times longer to download than a page created using Expression. Okay. Now I'm just going to let you know how I've actually created a page using Expression. Okay. All I did was I got my Word document. I copied everything from there. I went into Expression and pasted it and then saved it. That's all I did. I didn't actually have to create a brand new page. So instead of me going file, save as web page in Word, I copied, pasted into Expression and saved it in there. Okay, that's all I did. And it created a page which was 4.5 times smaller in size than the page created using Word. Why is that? Well, would you believe it that Word actually puts a lot of information into the web page about how it's created the page? And the truth is, nobody cares about that kind of stuff, okay? No user cares about it anyway. So what I'm trying to say is, when you look back at this, it creates baggage. There's lots more baggage. Conversion is not precise, so therefore you will have problems with it. It's very difficult to edit it once you convert it over. You have to keep converting back and forth, which is a problem as well. It's limited functionality now from a web page creation process and perspective. Limited functionality is just not acceptable. Okay, you want full functionality here. And size, you know, if you remember back to a couple of slides ago, a couple of minutes ago, I was talking about, you know, people hate to wait. Okay, why would you bother when at the end of the day, all you need to do is copy, paste, and save as? So my advice when it comes to web design, the difficulty level when it comes to HTML conversion programs, it's not very difficult to use it. There's no doubt. It's very simple to create a web page from it. Its effectiveness is appalling. Okay, with regards to size, which we don't want any bigger files than we need to have, and with regards to functionality, which is very, very low, it really isn't worth it. So while the reason I'm showing you this, guys, is because at the end of the day, if I don't show you this and somebody comes across it, they'll think, oh God, he never told us about this. Okay, and here we have a great way of creating web pages. It's not a great way. Okay, and I'm not doing this to keep myself in a job. At the end of the day, it's anyone who creates web pages using this method is deluding themselves. Okay, so what we're going to do in the next few tutorials is we'll have a look at the text editor, and then we'll move on to the HTML editor, and you'll see how effective they are in comparison to this method, which is very poor.